Let's get corrupted. What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Joe with Meteoric Serpents coming back at you for another episode of the Colubrid Corruption Podcast. Guys, hope you're all doing well this week. This is just to kind of preface real quick. It's a pre-recorded episode. This is being recorded a day after last episode, which, collection-wise, I had something pretty cool happen. As I got off the StreamYard last night, I went in and checked a couple of my gravid girls, and sure enough, my cockseye was mid-laying, which is absolutely awesome. And she gave me 5 good eggs, which is super cool. Her first clutch this year, she went 2 good, 3 bad eggs. Obviously, the first 2 hatched. I've talked about them. They've been doing great. They've taken 2 meals at the time of this. By the time it comes out, they'll be on meal 3, which is super cool. But yeah, another set of good eggs to add to incubation this year. So I'm just super, super stoked about that. Already at the time of this recording, the video from last night, or the podcast from last night, is getting, I don't want to say flack, but a lot of comments, a lot of people giving their thoughts, which I really appreciate. I find it cool that so many people were intrigued to see what I thought, what me and Max thought about everything. So yeah. But with all that said, if it's your first time tuning in, make sure you guys hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button here on YouTube. Once again, we're chasing 1,200 subscribers, so help us get there. Share this out with a friend. And then if you're not listening on YouTube, or, if you are, you could also listen to this on all the major audio podcasting platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube Music, everything like that. So definitely go check it out on there. Leave a 5-star review, especially on Apple Podcasts. Write a little review. That stuff always helps out. I know it helps out the algorithm and stuff and gets it out to more people that are interested. So yeah, let's see. Here on the screen, you can see all my social media down here below. It's at Meteoric Serpents everywhere. Give me a follow on there. Send me a message if you want to chat or, talk, whatever. My DMs are always open. Instagram preferably. That's where I'm at the most. All my stuff from Instagram gets filtered over to Facebook as well. And yeah, and then guys, USARK Florida, those are the organizations that fight for our rights to keep our reptiles. Make sure you guys are supporting that, join that. The memberships are cheap, fighting against legislation wherever it may be. So yeah, then the first link in the description below, or the show notes, goes to the Meteoric Serpents Patreon. Super cool. You get a lot of perks and things. You get a lot of behind the scenes access of what's going on in my collection. You're the first to know everything before social media knows. When I do pre-recorded episodes like this one, you get the episode either right after or the next day. This episode's obviously not coming out till Sunday like usual, but this is going to be released to the Patreon members on a Tuesday, which is cool. Also with that, we have a cool Discord group chat. Also gives you first dibs on anything I produce, any animals I produce, discounts on those animals as well. So with that said, anyone who's looking for cockseye and wants, first shots at what I have, it's a good way to claim your spot. Like I said last time, Phil's taking advantage of that from Wellington Exotics, taking advantage of that for a cockseye for this year. So you can too. And yeah. And also, guys, the Colubrid Corruption Podcast is now sponsored by FulviusApparel.com. You're looking for your latest reptile shirt, hat, sweatshirt, coffee mug, whatever it may be. There's a bunch of accessories plus clothing. Check out FulviusApparel.com. Use code CC10. That's CC10 to get 10% off your order. That is the promo code exclusive to Colubrid Corruption listeners. Very excited to partner with Justin on that. I love Fulvius. The shirt I'm wearing is a Fulvius Apparel shirt. So a lot of cool designs, especially designed for the reptile nerds, which I know most of these listeners are. So you'll enjoy their stuff. Definitely go check it out. Link to that in the description. Before we bring our guest on for tonight, we have our hashtag Colubrid Corruption of the week. Sometimes I hope I don't double up on these, but these are some cool animals. And I know I was getting some flack about where I ranked some of the Pituophis. But yeah, these are some real nice bull snakes from No Bull Serpents. He's always posting some good stuff. Um, so yeah, just super nice red bull snakes. Put in the description Crumbly plus Kingsville plus Hypo. Nice. That's all lineage. But yeah, go give No Bull Serpents a follow. He's a listener here, so appreciate him for reaching out. And if you want to be featured on a week by week basis, just put hashtag Colubrid Corruption on your Instagram posts, and I choose a random one each week to shout out. So yeah, go check that out. Now for tonight's episode, this is another installment of our newly corrupted segment, which I've enjoyed doing every time we've done them. It gives a cool perspective that I don't think you get to see on a lot of reptile podcasts, is bringing a newer keeper slash breeder on to kind of give their story, show where they're at in the hobby and their kind of aspirations of where they want to be. And when I was, kind of just peeling through potential guests, his name came across, and I'm very excited to have him on. This is Andrew Hughes with Hughes Reptile Adventure. So let's everyone give a warm welcome to Andrew to the show. Andrew, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me. I'm very, very excited. Excited to talk colubrids and reptiles in general. So,
absolutely. So just to kind of preface, I guess, I kind of caught wind of you, Andrew, I guess probably a little over a year ago, because obviously you and I knew who each other were at Colubrid Fest last year, which, by the way, I forgot to do that in the intro, guys. Colubrid Fest, September 12th to 14th, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Allen County War Memorial Coliseum. Have to do it once per episode. Which coming up soon. But that's where you and I met in person. But obviously, we've been in some sort of contact before that. I think I got introduced to you as a listener of the show, and now you're on here. So yeah,
it's so cool. Full circle, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, man. So I kind of want to hear, give me the whole spiel of how you got into the hobby, where this kind of started for you, and how that kind of segued into where you and your collection are at today.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that it's a pretty interesting story. I've listened to so many podcasts, most of your episodes, if not all of them at this point. Obviously, CCR is on my list, and there are others. And okay, so what's the most common thing that people get asked is, how did you get started? So I've obviously thought about this a lot, and it's kind of a joke. A lot of people are like, oh, it's the same story. I started catching snakes when I was a kid, and I kept one, and the rest is history. But I have reflected on it a little bit, and the truth is, I really didn't get started with snakes until I was a lot older. I wasn't a kid. I kind of didn't give myself credit at all for doing anything reptile related whenever I was younger, but that's not true. I did actually keep some anoles whenever I was younger.
Okay.
And but for whatever reason, the snakes weren't really an option, whether they just didn't have them at the pet store, or my parents weren't up for even letting me see that they were available. But I did do a few lizards. Abysmal keeping. I mean, heat rock and a lamp and the rug in the bottom. But we all learn lessons, right? And but let's say big gap between then and really when the truth of the most recent adventure with reptiles, it started in 2022 with my oldest daughter, who she's 14 now. So, do the math. She said, Mom, Dad, I really want a snake. And to be honest, like, I would have been fine with it. I've been a hunter for over 15 years now. I've always enjoyed the outdoors. I have no problems with snakes, and I've picked plenty of them up over the years. And maybe not necessarily looked for them so much, but man, she really wanted one. And my wife was a absolute no. I mean, she just said, nope, not talking about it. We are not going there. And that was much to my daughter's chagrin. She actually made a PowerPoint presentation and like said all the things. And she had actually done some decent research, and she got a pretty big no. And this persisted for a year. So she deserves a lot of credit. And
Just
it
to
is
stop you real quick,
uh-huh.
I pitched meteoric serpents to my dad via PowerPoint as well.
Perfect. So okay, so it's appropriate. It's an appropriate approach. She did a good job. And honestly, what happened was she persisted for a year, honestly. And again, just she was met with a lot of opposition. And at one point, it really kind of did her in enough that my wife was like, well, maybe we can consider something if she can keep a room clean for 30 straight days, which seemed like an insurmountable task for her at the time. Then maybe we'll consider something. And so we presented that option to her, and she followed through with it. I mean, to the T. So in our area, I live in Southern Indiana, very close to Metazotics and Clint Bartley, who plays very heavily in my colubrid story, reptiles in general as well. But there was another store that was the only one I knew of besides like a Petco or a PetSmart or something. And so we went there, and they specialized in ball pythons. And I'm telling you, they sold us. They sold us on the ball pythons. And my daughter did all the work. She raised the money and bought everything herself. And so she brought one home. And honestly, I thought it was the coolest thing. And 2 weeks later, I had one too. So bought from the same store. And to expand a little more, just for perspective, my what I do for a living is engineering. I've been a product design engineer for actually an archery company for close to 15 years now, and I've worked in other areas too within the company. But nonetheless, I just like to tinker. I have ideas. I want to try stuff. And so as soon as those snakes came into my house, I could not help but dig deeper for more information. And okay, talking about substrate, talking about the temperatures, talking about what do they need? What does enrichment mean? Also being met with the Facebook groups of 4x2x2 minimum. You better not put anything smaller, racks are terrible. All the things that we joke about, right? But I just started tinkering, right? So before I knew it, we had found Metazotics, and we had started going there because it's an awesome store and has so much variety. And before I knew it, we had a third ball python. Like we had bought an adult because I was like, that snake is awesome. And I started messing with stuff in regards to their enclosure. So one of the examples I would give is I felt like, okay, they need humidity, but one of the things that people bring up as an issue is respiratory infection because of particularly the mixture of having humidity, but also stagnant air. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I can add a system to ventilate automatically. And so I installed fans on them, and their time, I have them on timers, and I did the lights. And so all this time I'm going into Metazotics, and we're getting the things that we need at Metazotics. And I meet Clint, find out that we have some things in common. And before long, he's going, you're going to get colubrids. You're going to get colubrids. And I'm like, no, I don't know about that. I mean, we've got a lot going on, and I really enjoy these ball pythons, and I like learning about them. He's like, well, okay, well, you're going to get colubrids. Just wait for it. And so I'm pretty sure it was in August of that year that he started posting some pictures of cock's eye. And I was like, oh my gosh, those things are so cool. And I did the research. I looked into it, and I'm like, okay, well, they don't need the heat, but in theory, a cock's eye really likes to be kept kind of like a ball python. I mean, they like the extra humidity. without the heat. And that's obviously that's an oversimplification, but I connected the dots, and I had to reason my way to a point where I could justify adding to the collection, right? And so it's a mixture of just being absolutely enamored by that species, feeling like it aligned well with what I was already doing. And, I could implement those things, like implement forced air circulation and having day-night timers and so on and so forth. And, but also just loving the species, like thinking they're absolutely beautiful and incredible. And they just kind of fit the bill. And so I got one. And I was like, okay, I got my first colubrid. And that happened in April of last year. So, to talk about being newly corrupted, I definitely am new, not even to 2 years of owning colubrids. But everybody here also knows how this goes. They know how the snowball happens, right? So you can't just have one. I started with a female. I got to have a male to go with her, right? So, a month or two later, I brought that in. And then listening to these podcasts is probably like such a good thing and a bad thing. Obviously, it's phenomenal because it expands your knowledge. And what I really learned is, honestly, one of the best resources that there probably is right now for colubrid keepers is yourself. It's Clint and Zach and a few others who are doing this work, because when you just Google search, there's just not a ton of information.
I've said that it really does suck. And I wish like some of the hobby's best keepers can collaborate and put together a website for each respective species so that it could have the most comprehensive care guides, information, everything possible. But undertaking that is damn near impossible. So having podcasts like these where you get firsthand human experience and people being able to talk about the species like as a whole, I think is, like you're saying, it's one of the best tools out there in the reptile world right now.
It's really invaluable. And, to your point, that kind of resource is something that takes a lot of time and effort. I think it's true. If you look at the hobby as a whole, I mean, hobby being an active word there, a lot of the people who are very involved, they're not doing it for a living, right? It's something that they do for fun. It's something that they do on the side. And so if you're giving proper care and attention to your animals, maybe you just don't have the margin to write everything down. But to give people credit, this is a great opportunity because, okay, let's just sit down and let's talk about it for an hour or for 2 hours. And it's not quite as easy to reference for other people, but nonetheless, at least this information is out there. There are episodes of CCR, for example, that I've listened to probably at least a half dozen times because it covered a species that I either was interested in or that I'm actively keeping, right? And it's hard to pick out all the little details, and you don't just get the care sheet. It's also the things that they've tried, the things that didn't work. You kind of get the full spectrum. So, I mean, props to you and props to everybody else doing it. It is one of the best resources in the hobby right now, these various podcasts that are out there. And in my opinion, more will be better.
Definitely.
So, okay, jumping back to the progression. Okay, so I have 2 coxseye, and obviously, like I said, I'm looking, I'm listening, I'm learning, and really trying to understand, okay, there's so many things out there. There's so many things available. I'm starting to go to shows. I got to do Tinley last fall, actually, and I already had my eye on some stuff before I showed up there, as well as Colubrid Fest, which happened before that. And understanding fully, like, oh my gosh, there is so much out there. And having a tinge of that collector mentality, kind of wanting to have it all, I realized I have to put some guardrails on myself, or I'm going to end up over here doing something or trying to do something that's unreasonable, right? Taking care of a variety of species that I thought were really cool or looked amazing or had cool behaviors, but have a vast array of care requirements. Not to mention the fact that size is a factor too. So what I settled on is I really like things that are a little on the smaller side because space, I have a family. I actually just turned 40 last month, and I have 4 kids. So I am busy and I do have limited space. We fill this house very, very well as a family. And so, okay, how can I do this responsibly, but really be able to enjoy it? And the thing I just kept coming back to was Dion's rat snakes, or Dion's rat snakes, depending on who you ask. And that one was a huge challenge because honestly, even less information available for those guys. I know that they tend to come from Europe, obviously, and Asia as well. So they're a little more common over there, but they just don't seem to be super common over here. But I'm totally enamored with the species, the size, the care requirements, and listening to other people's experience with them being relatively easy and tractable and not hard to feed. And so I just kind of fell in love with the idea, and I determined like I have to start with this species. So I ended up picking up my first Dion's from Rob and Amy Zirkle. And then I just started filling in from there. So I have 4 Dion's now. And I want to put my own attention in that direction, like as the future goes forward. I know that I'm just, right now I'm just a pet keeper, right? But I do hope to positively contribute to the hobby in general, in my own way, in a way that benefits, right, everybody. Not only just to help keep expanding a species, especially over here in the United States, but to show that it has a lot of validity in the market. But I did not go down the kind of starter snake route, and I definitely have gotten to the point where I'm not a huge fan of that. I like the idea of people getting what they want and just trying to understand ahead of time what they need to be able to do for that snake that they want. Yeah, I'm sure there's some stuff you don't necessarily want a first timer walking away with, with a falsie, for example. But if you want something that's got a little bit more involved with its care, that's not just the standard approach that you get from the pet store advice, that's totally fine. I think people just need to learn what they need. So in expanding, my short list has several things on it that I don't have yet, and I've kind of learned that I have a bit of expensive taste. But as you can see on the thumbnail, I do have a adult female Mandarin, and that actually is one of Matt Most's production from the Henan region, which again tends to be on the smaller side. That's something I definitely want to play with going forward. I have a leopard rat, the European rat variety. I think they're just absolutely beautiful. And that's something that I definitely want to play around with going forward. So then I have to tell you about my favorite snake I have just to interact with. And this is a huge shout out to Clint because it was an animal produced by him. So it is a black rat, or Eastern rat, depending on where we're going to go with taxonomy. But it's a hypo melanistic, and he was on. Clint had him on sale on Black Friday, and I had kind of steered away from the idea of getting a species that was going to get a little bit on the bigger side, but he's beautiful. And then I went in there again later and I held him, and he wrapped his tail around my arm like the rat snakes love to do. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think I got to have this one. So he's my one snake that actually lives out in like a common space of the house. And, because I want him to get used to people. He is so awesome to interact with. He is my most gentlemanly eater. He very gently takes his food items and then goes, to eat them on his own. But he's super curious, and he will be out and about whenever people are in the room hanging out, the kids are playing. And I just love that about him. So I'm quickly falling in love with some of the bigger varieties too. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. And like I said, I have a short list. I would really love to have some Japanese forest rats, but like I said, a little on the expensive side. So we'll, and not super available, but Matt's got some beautiful examples of that species for sure. And just listening to the guys that keep a lot of the Asian species, I really am drawn to it. Beauty snakes, not necessarily like the bigger ones like the Vietnamese or the Taiwans, but the Chinese I'm a big fan of. So, but going back to it, and I can expand on it too. My heart is definitely moving toward strongly the Dion's rat snakes. I love the ones I have, to say the least.
And they're an interesting species for sure. And from what it seems like they're just really simple to keep. When it comes to breeding, their eggs hatch like almost magically fast. So I learned last year from Rob Zirkle. They just seem like really, really cool snakes. And I never really knew a whole lot about them, but I feel like over the past year, maybe year and a half, I've seen them just start piling up on Morph Market. It felt like out of nowhere. And I'm just like, where did all these animals come from? But I think
there's a combination of things going on, I think. So actually, Zirkle, he doesn't advertise on Morph Market as far as I know. I mean, I bought him through direct communication, and I did pick it up from him at Tinley, but I talked to him at Colubrid Fest about it. Him and Amy both, but Josh Alder of the Exotic Empire, I've gotten one from him, and then I also would like to shout out Zach from Hayes Serpents. He's working with some people that you had on a while back, but of Colubra. I think it's Mattia, maybe,
and Augusta,
and they are producing some stuff over there, or either working with some people who are producing stuff over there in Europe. And Zach has been bringing stuff in from them. So I know that the two red and yellow striped Dion's, the pair that I brought in, they're an unrelated pair, and for them to be coming in with such similar phenotypes, looking so similar to each other, but coming in unrelated there's definitely stuff going on over there. And some of the people like Francis Cascieri, I've listened to his episode where he goes over Dion's probably too many times at this point. But he talks about how, at least in the past, maybe even now, they're kind of like the corn snake over there, maybe not to the same degree that corn snakes are here in our market, but in the sense that they're not necessarily high valued. They're readily available, or they have been. So I would love to see that happen to them over here. That's a big slog because there's so many wonderful species available. But one of the things that really drew me to the Dion's was, not the fact that they come in morphs, which they do quite a few, and some really good looking stuff, but that one, like I've said many times, they stay small, 3 feet on the female side. I've heard even like 18 inches, think male hognose when it comes to the males. So extremely manageable. I mean, you can give them a lot of space relative to their size without having a gigantic enclosure. None of the babies and subadults that I have once opened their mouth at me. Regardless of whether I was trying to pull them out of a tub or even in regards to, feeding, they all drop feed so easily. I mean, you don't have to show it to them. They're there immediately.
Yeah.
And I've got one male who really likes to tail rattle. But the rest of them are just so calm and curious. And I just think that they probably make phenomenal pets for a lot of people. And not everybody is going to want to put a corn snake as a pet into a 4-foot enclosure or whatever some people say
Yeah.
they really might need. So that's kind of my big picture. I'm 2 years in here to reptiles in general, and even less so in colubrids, but I've become very passionate about it. And I want to kind of have a purpose behind what I'm doing. I don't want to be kind of flailing randomly. And I knew I needed to go in a direction that was going to be sustainable. So, I mentioned the whole idea of having that collector mindset. That's really when I made the switch to deciding like I'm going to get into colubrids, is because I realized that as much as I enjoy the ball pythons that I have, and I'm very glad, will never regret starting there, I realized because of the morphs and the stacking that's going on right now in that industry, and like that part of the industry, it is a endless rabbit hole. You will never ever get to the bottom. Even somebody who really has an enjoyment of a specific group of morphs or looks in particular, every single area is just like infinite branches because of the variety of things that you can put together. And I kind of feel the same way about corn snakes. I see some incredible animals posted on a regular basis by multiple people that I follow, all of which are snakes that I think would be really cool to own. And I love to see the change that happens to some of those corn snakes. But I see it the same way. If I were to ever get into it at all, I would just always feel like this is just incomplete. There's no way, I cannot possibly explore all the possibilities here. So I feel like that's a little more doable in the areas that I am currently keeping, and some of the things that I'd like to keep that I'm not yet. So
yeah, no, 100%. And a couple of the species you settled on, ones being like mandarins. I'd even consider the Dion's in there. Even the leopard rat snake. Like, there's really just not, like, I haven't had much of any guests on. I don't think I've had an episode about leopard rat snakes whatsoever. But like, how did you start learning this information about these animals? Was it speaking with the breeders? Like, how has your experience been as a consumer, and also as someone who's new getting into it, trying to learn from people who do this well?
Such a good question. There's a lot to cover there in and of itself. So on the leopard rat in particular, the first thing that brought my attention is just seeing pictures, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
Maybe surfing more market is the first time I saw one. I know that Chaz from Snakes and Adders over in the UK, he has some really, really good content on YouTube, and he does have one on the leopard rat. There are they're very limited resources, but it hit like the notes for me. Smaller species, the care requirements were in line with things that I knew I was already doing or very capable of doing. I love how they look. The orange eye on those guys is just phenomenal. Like, I know it's such a small thing, but it grabs my attention, and so I was gravitated towards the species. I actually hadn't planned on picking one up, but when I purchased the mandarin, the individual that I got it from had a couple leopard rats, and he was like, "Hey, I've got these two," and I'm like, "Okay, let's do one of those," But actually, that brings me to kind of another point, and that is, I've learned so much I know about myself that I enjoy learning. When I get into a hobby, I cannot help but dive in head first. Um,
Right.
my wife can tell you that. My friends can tell you that. I don't really take anything halfway. Once I've decided that I'm interested in it, I kind of take it whole way. That kind of happened with hunting. There you go. That kind of happened with hunting. I didn't grow up hunting, but when I decided I wanted to do it, I mean, I just went in whole hog, and I just figured like I got to learn some of this. I got to figure some of this out myself. So in the
Right.
last, this is a little off topic, but in the last close to 20 years of hunting, I've taken one animal I've harvested to a processor. I've done all the processing and butchering myself because again, it's just like, this is just part of it. I got to learn it. So in regards to this individual, she has not done that well here. She's actually kind of back into quarantine, and I have to give a massive, huge shout out to Kristen at Stygian Exotics. I know she works with this species, and I had reached out to her a while
Yeah.
back just for some additional information because, like you're asking, like where am I getting the information? There's just not enough, right? There's just not enough that's easy to find and publicly available. And what you do find when you go searching is just extremely vague. It's almost like they copied and pasted it from some other species. So that is really what it boils down to. I've asked Josh some questions about the species as well, because I know he gets them in sometimes. And I think that's really what it comes down to. I try my best to be someone who shows a healthy amount of curiosity without being a bother. I think that's probably
Yeah.
my biggest concern is you have these people who are clearly passionate about what they do. And I know they all want to share information, but if everybody messaged them all at the same time and asked all these random questions, that would be virtually impossible to deal with. So uh, I know there's a happy medium, right? There's a happy medium. I try my best to just be courteous, but that really is what it boils down to. Asking the people who have their hands in it for that
Yeah.
advice. And then, my goal on the backside is always to try to be someone who supports them, whether it means making sure to like their social media photos or comment on their posts, and then hopefully patronize them at some point for an animal. That's ultimately my goal. That's in my opinion, that's the best way I know to say thank you to
Yeah.
someone who's been kind and generous with their time and their knowledge to me. So
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's huge. And another thing is about just like knowing the breeder you're contacting, because like I've even had, people will sometimes just come and ask me questions and I have no problem shooting the shit with them or whatever. And then like I even had a customer of mine kind of just ask like, what's my process when I breed Texas rats? And I laid the whole thing out to him. But like I'm also 25 and I don't mind texting like a whole thing, and I like talking to people, and I know some other people aren't necessarily like that, but like that's who I am. And I think the more people who are open and willing to do that, I think it's better for the newer keepers. And I know I could think of a handful of, people who would be more than willing to do the same thing. So,
yeah, I mean, you got to read the situation. Obviously, I brought up Clint a lot because he's local to me. I
yep.
consider him a friend, and he is a busy man. He does
Yeah.
he does so many things. I have just an incredible amount of respect for him. Um, when it comes to cockeye, for example, most of what I know about the species originally came from me asking him questions. Now it's obviously been supplemented because, like I said, I've sought out as much information out there as I possibly can on the stuff that I'm interested in, but he's right in my backyard. But
Yeah.
I also know that you can't just walk in his shop and expect to get an hour of his time.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, it's not reasonable at all. It wouldn't be courteous anyway. So Right. It's a balance. It's a balance for everybody. And I think to your point, there's a happy medium of whether it's people starting to pool together some resources and continuing to be able to have discussions like this, and all the other ones that you've had. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So, but yeah, I mean, mentioning some of these people, like I also want to mention Jessica over at Hair Hollow Farms. She did a podcast recently. I think it's the Holdback Rack that her podcast
Yep.
is.
Yep.
And they did the whole, her and Kevin did a whole episode on Dion's alone. And it was, for me, it was amazing. I mean, I hope to have a lot of people listen to that episode, but it just, it gave me so much enthusiasm. And I just want to jump in, you know, I just want to jump into the conversation. But I also know that you can't just do that, right? Here I am, new. I'm learning. I'm trying my best to learn as much as possible. And there are lessons in that, right? There's lessons in, like I was saying, this leopard rat and me asking for advice because, you know, she's had some regurgitations, and she's back in quarantine as a precaution. And sometimes you have to do those things that are a little counterintuitive, or especially for someone who's looking at an animal and saying, oh no, you got to give it the best possible environment. You got to give it the most space and the most room. And, you know, a big lesson I learned when I first got started is my daughter's snake, her first ball python, he did okay at first, but then he went on a hunger strike when he was very young. And I was concerned and I was freaking out, like, oh my gosh, he's not eating. And the lesson I learned from
sounds like a ball python.
Right, exactly. Now I know that. But back then, just like many other new keepers, they're like, this is a problem. I mean, if you have dogs and cats and you watch them eat food every day, and then you have this animal that you're new to, and you know intellectually, oh, it only needs to eat once a week or maybe even less, but you still you see it refuse food, you're like, oh my goodness, this is bad. But then
I always think something's weird. If I have any animal in my collection like refuse food, besides the ball pythons, I should say, if any colubrids refusing food and they're not in shed, I'm just like, what's happening with you today?
Like, yeah, that actually is such a good thing, in my opinion. Having species that are good eaters, I'm learned very quickly how much better it is. But also, like, learning that lesson with the ball pythons, they're not going to die. You know, watch their weight, watch their body condition. It's not the end of the world. Clint coached me back through getting that dude on food, and he did need to, you know, a little quicker. But like the adult male I have, he was probably 5 years old when I bought him from Metazotics, and he ate a couple times for me, and he was on live at the time. But then he went on like a 4-month food strike. He lost. Yeah. He's a 2,000 gram ball python. He lost like 20 grams.
That's a big male.
He's a big male. He lost like 20 grams. He didn't even lose an ounce over months. Yeah. You know, as a new keeper, I was like, this is insane. I can't even understand how this is physically possible, right? How can this physiologically happen? So sometimes you just have to learn those lessons, right? You just have to learn them the hard way, maybe with a little coaching, but you still have to go through it and understand. You don't know everything. Try new stuff. And when it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And when it does, you learned a way to do something, right?
Yep. Definitely. Just off the rip, what, like, was it purely looks? Like, what made you get into the Asian rats before diving in, which we kind of said, into something that could have been easier, like North American rat snakes? Because like you went into the Asians, they could arguably be a little bit harder to take care of with certain species, but like, what, you know, I clearly see that, like, that's your objective, and, you know, like the black rat is like just a pet that you like, but like, what made you really decide this is it?
So over and above the appearance, right? Because there's a lot of snakes that would fall into the bucket of, oh, that's a cool looking snake, right?
Yeah.
It was, okay, so I have these ball python enclosures and I have the husbandry, what at the time I feel like down to a T. I'm consistently staying in the upper, the upper levels of humidity, not 90, but really consistently staying in the 70s and 80s. Temps are easy to maintain. I found the enclosures that I like. I've actually spent some time with my hydrometers, those Govee hydrometers, when I started working with the ventilation system, because I have them on it's like a Bluetooth plug, right? So I could go in and I could schedule, okay, I want the fans to turn on at 9 a.m. I want them to run for 5 minutes. Then I want them to turn off. I want them to do it again in the afternoon. And I let that run for a few days. And then I actually took my data from that Govee thermostat and I downloaded it into Excel and graphed it. Because what I was curious about is, if the substrate is holding the proper level of humidity, then, and I pull that air out, how long does it take for the humidity to come back to what it was versus what the air from the room was, which is obviously going to be a lot lower. And what I found is, even if I ran the fans for 10 minutes, and in theory, I was turning the air over in that enclosure 4 to 6 times, it was still returning to baseline humidity within like 15 minutes. And I was really impressed by that, first of all. So I got to that point where I was like, okay, I feel really good about where the care is. I've got them on day and night light cycles. They have the heat appropriate, that they need for digestion and so on and so forth. And after seeing several of these species and listening to them, I realized, like, okay, based on what I'm being told, cocci would thrive in this environment, just less heat, right? And literally, I'm thinking I can
and I agree, because I
substrate.
keep mine the exact same way. The only difference is the ball python rack has heat on it.
Yeah, like I actually do give mine some heat. I have a thermostat on the heat tape in the rack that I keep them in, and I set it to 77.
Yeah.
They can use it if they want it. They don't have to. There's plenty of room to get away from it. It's the small 4-inch tape, so it doesn't cover
Yep.
a whole lot of their tub. And I see them down there every once in a while. Like if I had to put a number on it, 5 to 10% of the time when I open a tub, they'll be down under the humid height I give them, actually near the heat. And then the rest of the time they're not. So it says to me, they don't need it. They'll do fine without it, but they do seek it out sometimes. So it's not, it's not a bad thing that it's there. At least that's kind of how I look at it. And I've heard enough other people, it's not me saying it for the first time. I'm repeating what I've heard other people say. If you give it to them and they actively use it when they have a choice, there's a sign that it's benefiting them to some degree, right? So that honestly was kind of the big thing. Secondarily, Clint has them, right? It's kind of part of his bread and butter. He's very well known for having several Asian species, definitely cocci being one of the ones that he does the most business with. So, and I was to the point where I really, really wanted to purchase something from him that was in his wheelhouse. Like he said it on the podcast many times, like they sell a lot of ball pythons because they're a pet shop and they do make good pets. So they're going to have them, but it's not ever going to be his main attention. And so all of those factors kind of combined, that it said to me, this is the most sensible choice. Because not only do I really love the way they look, I like what it takes to take care of them. The behavior issue is a whole nother thing. I actually was listening to your episode, where you did the rankings and you were talking about how your cocci absolutely hate you. And I've heard so many people
the
say that.
Volantite too. All my porfs generally don't like me. I would say my adult cocci, like usually if I use a hook and just get them out of the tub, once I have them in my hand, they're pretty chill. But I would say generally they are a snake that would not want to be handled. Not
Well,
want to be.
it's funny. I'll tell you a story. I went into Metazotics and I was this close to pulling the trigger on a cockseye, but I wanted to see an adult. Like I wanted to be close to an adult because most of the time all you see is the babies, when you go to these shows and stuff. So I told Clint, I said, listen, I'm really close to buying a cockseye. I will buy it from you if I do, but can you please show me an adult? Because I just need to have that final piece of the puzzle. So he's like, sure, come on. So we go back into the back, into his Asian room, and he slides the tub out and he puts his hand. So imagine, the rack, he pulls the tub out, puts his hand in over the edge of the tub, and then immediately pulls it out. And I hear a snake's head smack the edge of the tub. he's like,
mine are like, they're like little sharks. Cause if my hand gets in their eye view, suddenly they're like, oh, and like, and they're primed and ready to come after me.
It's funny because I wouldn't have expected it to give me the reaction that it did, but it almost endeared me to the species because then once it got it out of its system, he went in, scooped it up, had it out, handed it to me, and it wasn't a big deal. And that was probably where he gave me the mantra that I have in the back of my head, pretty much with colubrids in general, and it's confident grab. I know he said it on his podcast tons of times, and that one I took to heart, and it has not. It's been a good thing, right? Because the hesitancy is almost always going to get you messed up unless you have a specific animal that is just a little different, right? But the confident grab, that's always in the back of my head every time I go in a tub. However, I will say, so I have 3 cockseye. One of them is an adult, and she can be a little feisty. But again, it's all about if you give her time to think about it, then she might come after you.
Yeah.
If you're within the first 5 seconds, she just doesn't know what's going on, And then once I have a hand on her, she's fine. And my 2 that I bought as juveniles, the truth of the matter is one of the other stipulations I have for myself, for my collection, is I want stuff I can handle. And that kind of is the leopard rat is probably an example of something that maybe doesn't fit that bill so much. They do like security. They don't like being messed with very much. And that's something that I'm learning as well and trying to be really cautious on certain things. But generally speaking, I want stuff that I can pick up. And so I was pretty diligent with my cockseye to give them attention on a regular basis. And obviously I wouldn't want to do anything that was going to harm their health. But now that they're approaching adulthood, I find that both the male and the female that I originally bought are not very defensive.
Actually, interestingly, now that you said it and I kind of thought about it, my original cockseye female who passed on me last year out of nowhere, it's really unfortunate she did, but my original female, which I raised from a hatchling, she was always good with me. She was always chill. I now have I'm going to call him a juvenile to subadult male that I've raised since a hatchling. He's pretty solid with me, but my trio of adults were not raised by me. I got them as proven breeders, and they are the sharks, as I call them.
I mean,
the mini sharks.
I think that there's a lot of data points here and there that you can look to give that evidence of the fact that these animals do have some level of memory, some level of learned behavior. Because I totally get it. I mean, it's a species that's known for being fossorial. They're going to be hidden a lot of the time in the wild. So it would only make sense that being in an exposed situation, they're going to react very defensively. If they haven't learned that whatever the stimulus is not going to present an actual existential threat to their life. And so another little data point on that is my mandarin. I really wanted to avoid species that were known for musking. just, I mean, all my stuff's in the house. Eventually, I have big plans to build a snake room in my pole barn that's all set up and everything. But right now, they're in my house. In all honesty, the vast majority of my reptiles live in my daughter's room because that's where they all started. And there's room in there, and she doesn't care. She really gets into it. You know, all my kids, it's something that we connect on together. But I really didn't want that, right? I didn't want to be scrubbing it out of the carpet. So there's certain species I'm just probably never going to have them, right? The king rats, I think they look amazing. I'm just probably not going to have them. Okay.
Gotcha.
So when the Mandarin came, she was pretty nervous, as you could probably imagine. The guy that I got her from has a decent sized collection. So I know that he's not in and out of their tubs all the time. And I know that they don't necessarily prefer it either. But when I first got her, she was very willing to musk on me. And it's very anticlimactic. You know, it's just a little smear here. But it's not like she's squirting it everywhere. But nonetheless, she wasn't a huge fan of interaction. After she got out of quarantine and I kind of got her established in my rack, at this point, I can get her out. No tail rattle, no musk, curious, tractable. And I'm convinced that kind of a thing is just learned behavior. It's learning that, oh, this thing that's happening, I'm not going to die. So I don't need to scare this giant ogre away from me. And so, I mean, I'm happy to get her out. Now, I might not necessarily just hand her to anybody to let somebody else hold her, but she definitely has changed her behavior from a consistent defensiveness to consistent apathy. We'll go with that, right? Which to me is a huge progress.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to touch on with you is you bringing, which you kind of spoke on a little bit, is you bringing your skills as an engineer into the reptile hobby. And I know your most recent feat, which was quite recent, Clint had manufactured had a brain fart. The nesting boxes. Thank you. Yeah. The blacked out nesting boxes based on Dr. Whitman's talk at Colubrid Fest regarding Testosia. So I just kind of want to hear from you where the idea came from, how that design came about, and why you decided you were the guy that was going to do it.
Well, okay. So, I mean, I know that Clint's told the story, but I'd love to give my side of the thing. It's certainly nothing that he's hidden because he's told people my name several times in talking about the story, but it's also not something that we're like going out and shouting from the rooftops together. But yeah, what really happened was I had already been messing around with designing some one-off things. I have it on my Instagram page. It's way back there at this point, but one of the enclosures I have for my ball pythons, it has the same kind of approach that Applegate enclosure has, where there's an enclosure, a subterranean hide that is also a tub that slides in and out. And so, I mean, obviously you can buy that, but I had an enclosure and I was like, well, I can probably just make my own. So I 3D printed basically a fitting that would screw together and create like a port. And then I built an MDF riser that I called it that would fit a tub. And it's literally a busser, like a restaurant busboy tub that you throw dishes in. Yep. And so I kind of threw that all together and it works phenomenal. And I think it's really cool to see the way that those snakes will use things, but maybe not to the point that people would expect them. Like people, for a ball python, you think, oh yeah, they go into burrows, so she's going to spend or he's going to spend all their time down in that tub. Not true. not true, but they do use it, right? They go in there, they come out. I've done a couple other things. I really like offering in an enclosure. I like offering a high point too, a hide up high, or a sky hide, as some people call them. The first bracket that I made for those, it was just 3D printed. I just kind of designed something that would let me slide those vivarium electronics hides into, and then slide it out. So if I needed to get the snake out while it was in that hide, I could. And then I come to find out, oh, you can just buy them. the guys at Vivarium actually make some. So I've always kind of used 3D printing and design that I just kind of do inherently already as a way to supplement my hobby. I will also mention, like, I have a VE6 rack from them, and I didn't want it to just be a typical rack. So again, I routed out grooves and put some custom LED lights in there that I can time on and off with sunset and sunrise. I put clear fronts on the tubs. I designed like a manifold system for me to use a computer cooling fan to do that forced air ventilation through the tubs themselves.
Awesome.
And so I've been doing it. Like, I say all that stuff to say I've been doing it because to me, it just was a natural, it was a natural marriage of the reptile hobby and being able to kind of produce things in very, very small quantities through 3D printing. But that would stand up to what it needed to do in, say, a tub or a reptile enclosure. So my mind's already going there. Like, what are some other things that I could potentially use this on? And I went to Colubrid Fest last year, and obviously listened to the talk. And when he said dark hide, I put human hides in every single colubrid enclosure, whether it's something that they need, that they need for their health or not. I put it in there because, again, to me, it's choice, and it's easy. It's so easy to just, melt a hole in the side of a sandwich box that you get from the grocery store and throw some sphagnum in there. It's really easy to do. But listening to Dr. Whitman really talk about how light is certainly something that a lot of these animals are trying to get away from to feel more secure. And I'm thinking, like, okay, well, I print pretty much everything out of black PLA because it's just easy to get your hands on and it prints really well. But that also means that no light's going to get through. And I just kind of started thinking, like, okay, well, if you did print a box that was either a nest box or a humid hide, you could come up with a way, instead of just cutting a hole straight in the side, where you kind of obscure the actual hole to go in the box from view once the animal's all the way inside. So I was like, well, that's kind of the best of both worlds, right? Because you're not cutting a hole in something. First of all, you potentially could have something that's made for the purpose. But also you can really optimize it for what the animal presumably wants, as opposed to just giving it what you can because of what you're able to come up with. And so I just started piddling around. And my initial shape and design was intended to fit against the wall of one of my own tubs. And I initially only put one slanted side because I have little vents in the back of the tubs that let the air flow through. So I was like, well, I can't shove it all the way against the back because there's a vent there. So my first one just had the one slanted side. And I made a couple of them. And my first one was, just say it didn't turn out that great. So the normal design process is you try it, you see if it works. And if it doesn't, you try to figure out, what do you need to change? And at the same time, and I've told this to a couple other people, if you play around with design for 3D printing in particular, you need to also understand 3D printing and the process, because you want to have the least amount of support material used. You don't want to have overhangs of parts like this, because when it tries to print this part, that material is just going to fall over. So it has to build a tree up to that point to be able to print on it. So trying to avoid that. And so all of these things, and I came up with something that, okay, this is going to work. It's pretty much printing by itself. And I went ahead and made one for myself and threw it in an enclosure and straight in. I mean, like immediately. I gave it to one of the cockseye as a humid hide initially, and she went in it immediately and pretty much stayed there 90% of the time. So I ended up sending a picture through social media to Dr. Whitman and just say, hey, I just want to let you know, your presentation had an effect on me. I sent one to Clint and I said, what do you think about this? And he was like, oh, that's really cool. And I said, well, if I have an extra, do you want to test it out? And so he immediately said yes. And the short version is basically, here it is. I did have to change some stuff. One of the things, my initial design, you couldn't stack them together. They didn't nest. And that was not going to be very conducive for sending them anywhere in a box.
Right.
But I knew that I don't want to be the guy who tries to sell a bunch of them myself, right? I want people to get the benefit of the idea. And I knew that talking to Clint about it and kind of asking for his advice as well. So, I don't think he's probably given himself enough credit. But while I may have come up with the initial design concept, I really talked through some of the things that a seasoned snake keeper and breeder would know to try to make sure that it was something that would actually make sense and that, be usable. And this is what we ended up coming up with. So nice. I hope everybody gets a chance to use them. And this is the one other thing I want to say about 3D printing in general. So these are 3D printed. It's not like they're injection molded, but this is where 3D printing, I think, really meshes with reptile keeping so well, is because let's be honest, there is not a market to sell 1 million of these this year. There's not enough people, right, to be able to do that. And having knowledge about manufacturing and how it pairs with designing, let's say that you did make a injection molded version of this, like a lot of the plastic products that we buy on a day-to-day basis. Well, you have to build a tool out of steel for that. And that tool may cost anywhere between $20,000 and $100,000 to make one part. So that means that a lot of really good ideas can be had and come up with and even fleshed out that would work really well in the reptile hobby, and they will never see the light of day because nobody can justify spending 6 figures on just the run up to being able to offer a product for sale.
Yeah. And, to your point about 3D printing, I've been seeing a lot more and more 3D printed products come into the reptile hobby, whether it's something like this. I've seen a lot of perch type things, whether it's, a hanging perch for a cage or a tub type perch. I have a few of those actually, like tub perches.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, all great products, and I think they're great ideas because makes it easy to clean as well. Like there's a lot of factors that make them a huge asset to the hobby.
It's really cool to be able to try stuff out. Honestly, like that's one of the best parts of it, of the medium, right? The manufacturing method, if you will. Because you can come up with an idea. And if you have a resource to be able to take the idea from your brain and actually make a representation of it, you can make it the same day and you can try it out. Granted that it's within reason and it kind of fits into the platform of making a part like that. So I have several other things in my enclosures right now that are just me messing around. I actually have a couple really small subterranean hides in my rack system, even in the smaller tubs. And guess what? My snakes use them. And there's nothing super complicated about them necessarily, but it's just something that's a little bit different than what people would normally use. And I'm not saying that they're perfect. I think some refinement is still needed, but that is one of the other ways I hope to be able to contribute to the hobby, is coming up with just random ideas that actually will benefit people and benefit their animals in the way that they keep them.
Yeah, definitely. I hear you, man. All right, cool. Let's see here. You had sent me a few pictures of field herping and stuff. So you've gotten into that, I assume, as you've embraced the hobby keeping side. You like going out herping now?
Oh, I love it. I don't go enough. The thing that gives me the opportunity to do it more than anything is how fervent we are of campers as a family. We do camp quite a bit. We have a travel trailer. My wife's family has always been into camping. So even if I wasn't proactive about getting campsites booked, they'll get booked one way or another. So we've already been to several of the state parks just this year here in Indiana, which there are many really awesome ones. And I'll be out next weekend. I'll be out camping at O'Bannon, which is kind of in the Louisville area. And I've definitely found reptiles there. So the one thing I would say that I've learned about herping in the last couple of years, it's not that I never did it. I just never did it on purpose. I've found things over the years, whether it be turtles, snakes, salamanders, frogs, toads, you name it. And I love it. I've always loved it. But what I know now is if you look, you will find. And I just wasn't looking. Where, everybody ends up seeing something kind of on accident because it just falls in their lap, or an animal just happens to be in a place that they're at and they see it. And it's like, oh, wow, that's awesome. And that's certainly happened to me over the years. We actually just went camping at another state park called Spring Mill State Park here in southern Indiana. And I have pictures from, I think it's 7 or 8 years ago, where I found 2 rat snakes while we were on that camp out. And of course, I picked them up and took the bite so all the kids could see them up close and everything. But we literally just walked up on them. I wasn't looking for them. They just happened to be in there, and I was in the right place at the right time to find them. And now I am looking all the time. I mean, my eyes are always peeled, and I've really kind of figured out that when you're in the right environment, they're always there. They're always there. You just got to look for them. And sometimes you just get super lucky. So last year we were camping at a place called Clifty Falls, and there's a trail that goes down through a creek bed, and it's one of the coolest hikes. The creek bed is a lot of rocks, and 90% of the rocks that you look at have fossils in them. So there is something to find everywhere you look. And there are a ton of crayfish. I found 2 queen snakes in that creek bed, which I know that's not a species that a lot of people are super familiar with, and I wasn't at the time either, but I think that they are absolutely amazing. It's an olive green snake. It really, to me, looks a lot like a garter snake, and it has kind of a cream colored belly. They are a smaller species, but they are a specialist when it comes to their diet. They eat crawfish, right? So I think sometimes refer to them or refer to a very similar as just a crawfish snake, but nonetheless, queen snake in this case. And I was doing some research and found out that they can actually sense the chemical that a crayfish releases when it molts its skin, so that can actually find soft-bodied crayfish to eat to avoid getting pitched, when it's having a meal. So I mean, how amazing is that? It's
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. And for me to run across not one but two on a weekend of camping and hiking, we walked right up on an eastern milk snake on that camp out. While we were hiking, uh, tons of water snakes. I mean, there's water snakes all over the place. Nerodia galore in southern Indiana, no doubt. Probably some of the easiest stuff that I can find. And then our first big camp out this year was at Brown County State Park, kind of near the Bloomington area. And we had a big group of people. I'd say there were probably 12 or 13 of us that were all hiking, kids, adults, etc. And my next door neighbor and I were kind of bringing up the rear. And I always am the last one out of the creek bed, because as soon as we hit a creek bed, I'm flipping rocks, I'm looking for stuff. And we were finding all kinds of long-tailed salamanders and slimy salamanders. So needless to say, I got a little behind, and we're trying to catch up, and I'm walking, and all of a sudden my neighbor goes, "Whoa, whoa." And I look, and there is a giant black rat snake crawling right across the trail. And I just like beeline past him and snatched that guy up. He gave me quite the threat display. But also the cool thing that happened was we tried to call to the group, and they were too far ahead of us. But just so happened there were some other hikers coming down the stairs that we were next to, and they were super curious. And I was able to show him to her and then let him go on his merry way.
Nice.
That obviously was a herp that I didn't flip him, I didn't plan him. He just walked right in the right place at the right time. But it was probably one of the coolest interactions I've had all year. So, I mean, shoot, I found a black king snake in my next door neighbor's barn. He's got a bunch of chickens over there, so obviously black snakes show up every once in a while. But yeah, they're all over the place, and that is the big picture thing that I've kind of figured is you just got to look. They're there. They're all over the place where we are. And I know that every location is different. And that's the thing that I really haven't done. I haven't gone out of my way to go to another location that I'm not typically going to just for the purpose of herping. But that absolutely will happen more in the future, no doubt.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, all right. I have some wrap-up questions for you. They're a little bit different than the typical ones, I guess, because it's coming from a different perspective.
Sure.
But, usually I ask, what's a big motivator for what keeps you going with reptiles? But that doesn't really apply here. You're new. I know you're still fresh. You're excited. So what is it that excites you most about the hobby, and as you continue to work towards your future here?
So I think the thing that I'm most excited about is I realize how much more I have to learn, because every time I turn a corner, proverbially, there's new information, and sometimes it's hard to come by. At this point, a lot of it's coming just with personal experience, just working with the animals that I have, seeing other stuff when I do get a chance to go to a show that's got some variety to it, listening to these podcast episodes where things are getting covered that I'm not used to seeing very often. But definitely that idea of there's just so much more out there. And then kind of following that is that I am building a passion. I already am passionate about this specific species. When I'm talking about the Dions or the Dionis, I really love them. I love every single one I see. I have to hold myself back majorly, and I have to kind of think to myself, I need to be strategic. Don't take on too much too soon. I still really haven't even gotten a chance to drill down with some of the keepers out there that I know that I've touched base with, who are keeping them and who have been keeping them successfully.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited about what the future can hold. And again, I know I'm new, and I'm not starting young. I'm not in my 20s. But I can look at the things hobby-wise that I've taken up over the last 2 decades of my life, and understand that I'm decent enough at putting my attention in a singular direction and just kind of moving forward in that one direction for a while. So even to the point that I see this as something that I want to do in and through retirement. And I'm sure you could probably talk to some of the guys who are into it now, who've been doing it a long time, who might say, well, it's a lot of work. And so I have to also be, on the flip side, diligent with myself to make sure that I don't make it they don't make it into something that becomes too much. But I'm very excited about being part of the hobby going forward, doing my best to be responsible, and working with something that I am very passionate about, and I know I can become more passionate about without stepping on too many toes, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. What would you say in the next like 3 to 5 years or so, where do you foresee Hughes Reptile Adventure being? Whether you want to talk species wise, is there anything on your desire, your wish list, like species wish list? Do you want to be breeding on a regular basis? Like, kind of go into all that, like what you plan for the future of what you're doing.
So I'm pulling up really quickly my short list. So first of all, yes, breeding is 100% part of the future. And I actually hope to have my first clutch this year, but things did not work out the way I was hoping. So I probably am not going to end up with a clutch this year, but I know that I've been preparing for next year anyway. My big stipulation on the breeding, though, is I don't want to come into the hobby and contribute to any issues. So I want to know that the things that I end up producing are things that are of value to other people, right? That there's going to be at least a demand for those animals to go into a good home, whether it be to another breeder. I really want to help some potential new keepers, pet keepers, see the benefits of a different species that's maybe not as commonly seen. But that's definitely a big piece of the puzzle, is breeding and doing it as responsibly as I possibly can. The stuff that's on my short list, some of it's breeding desire, some of it's just I just want to have some, maybe a little bit of a Noah's Ark style, male, female, and that's good enough. But I've got cock's-eye Dions, I've got Mandarin, I at least have my first Situla. But the Japanese forest rats, I love the way they look. I know their care requirements are right up the alley of what I'm typically doing already. And I like their size as well. I know that the big barrier to entry is really just kind of price and availability. So what could that mean in the future? I don't know. If I'm talking like long term, if I'm able to be part of changing that piece of the puzzle a little bit, that would be awesome. But that's very aspirational right at this point. I really like also the Bella rats, the Chappa rat snakes.
Okay.
Again, its look, its size, its care requirements. I know that they're a little harder to keep, according to, like, I know I've heard Matt talk about them, I've heard Clint talk about them, and a couple other guys, and that they really like a moss mixture, and it's a little more temperamental with the substrate and stuff. But again, at the right time, when I have enough experience, that's on my list. And then both in the kind of Lamprophis, I like African files, and I like the Aurora house snakes.
Nice.
So, like the African file snakes, I have talked to Kayla a little bit about them. Kayla Martin from Infrared, and the two different varieties. But understanding again, like, okay, well, if you can take care of a ball python, you could probably take care of a file snake pretty well. And again, they're just so different, right? They look different. And if you notice, all the stuff on my list at this point, really, besides the Dions, are things that are kind of wild type only. Like there's not a lot of stuff going on within the species. So I feel like I could really explore having some individuals and not feel a need to like dive a lot deeper in because there's just not other stuff to be picking up within those umbrellas. So I have plans. I was hoping to get it done this year. Realistically, it might be next year, but I have a good sized pole barn in front of my house, and I am planning a separate home office space. I don't work from home, but I'm in my bedroom right now. You can probably tell it's not the best place when I do have work from home days, and I do some other stuff where having kind of a separate space would be nice. And then in conjunction with that, I want to have a reptile room on the bottom floor where I can keep, separate from the house and also have climate controlled separately to what, we like to live at here in the home.
And more space.
And more space. I mean, obviously, even with my barn's 30 by 40, which is a great size. And when I built it, I was like, oh, I'll never need anything bigger. And of course, like, oh, it'd be nice to have a little bit bigger barn so I could put a little bigger camper in it or something like that. So I hope I don't go too undersized. But right now, it'd basically be like a 16 by 8 space that I would be able to dedicate solely to reptile keeping.
Nice.
And maybe that would be a good way of keeping me from growing too big at some point, right?
Okay. Yeah. I hear you. All right. And all right, so this last question I usually ask everyone, but coming from your perspective as a newer keeper, what's really your elevator pitch to either someone looking to get into the hobby for the first time, or they're coming from another segment of the hobby that's not colubrids, is basically why colubrids? Why is that the best choice?
I do actually talk about this a lot. One of the downsides, I think, of the hobby in general is that it isn't as widespread. I mean, right, you can walk outside and throw a rock and you're going to hit somebody who owns a dog or a cat, because pretty much everybody does. So it's easy to connect with people on something like that. It's not so easy to connect with people when it comes to reptile keeping, and snakes in particular, I've found, because they're just not so common. And obviously we all know that people have some misconceptions about snakes. So I love to really tell people how much joy I personally get from keeping reptiles. And at the same time, in the big picture, they're so easy to keep in comparison to things that a lot of people associate with, say, pet keeping. The infrequency of feeding, the simplicity of setting up. Like once you get the setup right, I have gone through the effort of making things as hands-off as possible. So everything I have is on timers. My daughter has 2 crested geckos. I have a sprayer that does everything automatically. I mean, she's got to feed them, but like we have bioactive in my enclosures. Like I said, I have the air, I have the lights, everything's on timers. So I know that if I have space for it, it will not be a bunch of extra work. And they're just easy to care for. Second of all, I tell people I've learned there's so much variety, not only of species available, like in the colubrids, but even if you don't go the colubrid route and you go more like, in the ball python route or some of the others, there's so many colors and patterns available. There's literally anything that you personally like, you will be able to find it. And there's a variety of sizes. There's a variety of temperaments. So no matter what, I think in general, they're so easy to keep compared to, say, mammals as pets. And 2, there's so much variety. You will definitely be able to find something that you personally like, maybe more than your friend or whatever. So it's kind of like a win-win in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed.
One other thing I'll mention kind of along those lines is, Now, I started my Instagram account literally just for fun.
Yep.
I was still relatively new to keeping reptiles. And I'd been posting pictures to my Facebook page. And I've been on Facebook since cavemen, right? Because I was in college when you had to have a college email address to sign up for Facebook.
Okay.
So I've got tons of friends, tons of family, all kinds of acquaintances on Facebook. And in my opinion, that is its draw, is the fact that you can connect with people pretty easily. All the other stuff that's come along is not so helpful. But I'm sharing pictures of my family, of my kids. I've got family members and friends who, like, maybe don't see them as often. I tried to just do some general life stuff. And so, of course, I'm going to post some pictures of snakes. And after, the weeks of putting a snake picture up and having the 2 or 3 people that are going to like it immediately, and then everything else is, I'm not coming to your house again, or don't ever ask me to come over there, or something more inappropriate, but more inflammatory. I was like, this is not fun. I know most of these people are just joking and they're trying to be lighthearted about it, but I'm doing this for fun. I think I just need to start another Instagram profile, and that's where I'm going to put everything. And so I just have had fun with it. If you look at some of I try to make a reel every once in a while. I am not good at it, but every once in a while I hit on something and it kind of turns out okay. But I just get a lot of enjoyment out of it, right? And I'm not terribly great at taking pictures, but some of my animals are so photogenic that I just take a picture and it's like, dang, that looks awesome because of what it is, not because of what I'm doing. So, and I have noticed that more so than any of my other social media platforms, people seem to like it enough to pay attention. So I'm ultimately doing it for my own benefit. And it's a little bit of cataloging too, so I can remember the things that are happening that I'm doing. But I enjoy looking at other people's stuff too. So if maybe some other people can enjoy what I'm doing, then so be it. It's
absolutely
a little better for everybody. And I will say that the reptile Instagram, as I call it, has been one of the coolest places to meet new people. Yes, there are crummy people everywhere. That's just the human condition. But in general, I find that people are super friendly. I have gotten phenomenal advice from multiple people that I've shouted out tonight, just because I found their Instagram and asked for help, or introduced myself, or just told them, hey, I love this that you have. I don't know if I'm ever going to get to own one, but the black copper rats that Kristen has over at Stygian, holy moly. If it weren't for Reptile Instagram, I wouldn't know that thing exists. So
they're cool.
That's one of the coolest pieces of that puzzle of this social media thing. It's not always positive, but by and large, it has massively benefited me and my knowledge, and at least made it a little bit more easy to connect with people who actually care about reptiles, because in our day-to-day life, unfortunately, as of right now, those people are a little hard to come by.
Yeah, for sure. Cool, man. All right. Well, no, this was great, Andrew. I really appreciate your time tonight, kind of giving some of your insight. Like we said, being a newer keeper in the hobby, I'm really excited to see what you do over the next few years. I hope to see you producing Dion's, Coxeye, all that good stuff. So yeah, just excited to see where you're at, and hopefully down the line, we'll be able to have another conversation on here. Next time it's about breeding, because that'll be fun.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah,
I really appreciate you giving me the time. It's been a joy just to chat about it, because I don't get to do it every day. But yeah, I really appreciate it, Joe.
Absolutely. I will have your Instagram linked in the description. But any last words to the audience who's listening?
Yes, I will say, as a new keeper, one of the hardest things to do, but the best lesson that I have learned is to be patient. Almost every single situation or issue that I've come across has been solved by being patient while doing the right thing. And so again, I struggle with it. I struggle with it probably more than the average person, but that is a piece of advice that I have to constantly remind myself of. And that's something that I would definitely tell to other people.
I've been doing this for some years now, and I'm still as impatient as could be. Mostly it's out of excitement, but like, yes, you're 100% right. Patience is a virtue with reptiles and a very important one. So, yeah. All right. Well, cool, man. Yeah, you're here with me, so I'm just gonna run this outro. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please leave a like. Make sure you hit subscribe on today's video. Go follow Andrew on Instagram. If you're listening to us on the podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube Music, all that good stuff, make sure you give us a 5-star review. If you're on Apple, write a little something on there. That always helps out. Feel free to join the Meteoric Serpents Patreon. First link in the description below. Again, Discord group, exclusive access, early access to stuff, and first dibs on my productions. And also thank you, Fulvius Apparel, once again for sponsoring Colubrid Corruption. Get your latest reptile apparel from fulviusapparel.com. All of the links are in the description below for that. Use code CC10 for 10% off your order. And that will do it for tonight, guys. This was episode number 72 of the Colubrid Corruption podcast. This was our newly corrupted segment with Andrew Hughes of Hughes Reptile Adventure. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace out, guys.